step is to prepare all the various components that we need for our wallet. I like to have everything ready to go so that when I'm ready to assemble my wallet, all the pieces are ready to go. So we're going to start by making the credit card pockets. You'll remember that we just fused a piece of interfacing to the bottom of each. So we're going to take this now to our ironing board and we're just going to fold this over and press it so that we have a nice pocket with a nice fold on the top and it's stabilized in the middle. So we've done that for each of those 3 pockets. And then we're going to take them to our sewing machine and we're just going to do a top stitch right along the edge. I like to use the stitch on my machine it's called a top stitch, and it does a double stitch all the way, so it makes my thread just a little bit easier to see and a little bit darker. When I put these on my body of my wallet, they're going to look kind of like that, and that gives me a nice row of stitching at the top of each one. So that's the credit card pockets. We can set those aside, and next we're going to make our carrying strap. To make the carrying strap, we need a fairly long strip, and our fabric isn't long enough to get that, so we're going to join 2 pieces. And the way I like to join these is with a diagonal seam, because then I don't have the bulk of a seam. So I'm going to lay one piece on my workspace. I'm going to take the other piece and line it at a 90-degree angle. And then I'm going to stitch right along here. If you want to mark that before you can, you certainly can, but what I actually find easier is to offset this just a tiny bit, and then when I go to my my sewing machine, I can eyeball from here to here. It gives me nice little points that I can follow, and I just eyeball that and I can stitch a really nice straight line. I'm going to put a pin in to show where you're going to stitch, but you're just going to stitch right across there. Then take it to your ironing board and press that seam open. It'll lay really nice once you've got it sewn, and then trim the excess away. After you have that sewn together, then you're going to press it, and you're going to begin by folding everything in half and pressing the entire strip in half. That marks your center line. Then you're going to bring each of the raw edges into that center line and press that. And I usually do all of one side and then go do all of the other side. It's easier to just keep one side at a time going. Once you have those pressed, you're going to have a strap that looks like this. And it's going to be folded to the center, and then you're going to fold it in half and press it again. After you've got all that done, you're going to go sew all the way around the edges. And I just sewed about 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around the entire strip. In my next step, I'm going to add the hooks on the ends. This is so that you can make your strap detachable. So if you don't want to have a carrying strap, you can just take it off and throw your wallet in your purse. The easiest way I've found to do these is to put a little glue from a washable glue stick on the end. Put that in place, and I always put it on the ugliest side, so if everything didn't look exactly right in my stitching, that's my back side. You just want to make sure that from one end to the next your strap isn't twisted and they're the same. So put that on there, and then you can go to your sewing machine and do a zigzag to stitch that in place. I just drop my feed dog, set my zigzag for the width of that, and go back and forth. You'll have to turn it so that this is facing you, because otherwise your foot won't go down against it. And I always make sure I do a few locking stitches at the beginning and the end of my stitching. So then your strap is ready to go. Next, you're going to make the tabs for attaching the carrying strap to the wallet. So you're going to start with your piece of fabric, press it in half to mark the center, bring each raw edge into the center and press that, so it looks like that, and then fold it in half and press it again. Then you're going to stitch along each side of the tab, and you're going to make 2 of those. And those are your tabs for attaching your carrying strap. Next is your zipper pull, and you start with a long piece of fabric, and you're going to do the very same thing with it, folding it in half and bringing your edges into the side. If you watch, I have another video on how to make a zipper pull where you use a 1/4 inch bias tape maker. Watch that because that's so much easier. You don't burn your fingers and it's quick and simple. After you get your zipper pull made, you're just going to sew down the center of it to secure all the layers together. Next, we're going to make the pen holder. We're going to start with a piece of fabric, fold it in half this direction. So we basically have a square. And then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam along that raw edge. Then we're going to take this and open this out and press that seam open. Then we'll turn it right side out, position the seam so it's on the back, press it nicely, and then fold it in half and press it again. So now we've got raw edges up here which will be caught in a seam, and we've got finished edges all the way around and an opening right here that our pen can go into. Next, we're going to bind the upper see-through pocket. So we've cut a piece of vinyl. Make sure you leave the tissue paper attached when you cut your vinyl so that you can see it. Otherwise, you'll lose it on your workspace. And we've cut 2 pieces of binding. I like to take my binding and instead of pressing it in half, I just pin it in half. I find that when I sew this, I get a much easier and nicer finish on the side if that line isn't pressed in place. So I just fold this in half and stick a couple pins in to hold it. Then I'm going to go to my pocket and I'm going to sew that piece of binding on the edge. I've put my vinyl against the bed of my machine. Sometimes it has static and it doesn't want to move, so if you keep the tissue paper under it, just moving it out of the way so it's not caught in your seam, you'll find that it's much easier to sew on vinyl. And I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch on there. Then I'm going to bring this around to the front, pull it in place, and I'm going to stitch along here. This is an instance where it's really helpful to have the stiletto because you can hold that in place as you stitch. And I've got a lot of videos on showing how that works too, so make sure you check those out. And you can see on this side, I've already sewn it in place. So I've got it stitched along the edge. Now this is the line of stitching that you would do when you sew it down. On this particular piece, this is going to be left open. And this side is going to be attached to the wallet, so I'm going to have one line of stitching where I sew my binding down. I'm going to have another line of stitching where I attach it to the wallet. And I want that to look the same on both sides, so I went ahead and stitched a line there just to finish that off nicely. I don't normally do that line of stitching. I only did that because this line's going to be stitched in place and I wanted them to match. Now we're going to bind our lower see-through pocket. Same process as the last one. Take your vinyl, leave the tissue underneath it, fold your binding in half, pin it to match, to make them stay together, position that on the edge of your vinyl, stitch through it with your 1/4 inch seam, and then bring your binding around to the front and stitch right along the edge, and your lower see-through pocket is finished. Finally, we're going to prepare our pocket for the outside of the wallet. We've cut our piece of quilted fabric, and you have to kind of look at the piece and decide, is there one piece that you'd rather have at the top? To me, this looks nicer to make this the top of my pocket and this the bottom. So this is the edge that I want to bind. So I want to turn that over and make sure that I attach my binding that I folded in half on that edge. And I'm going to just stitch along that with a 1/4 inch seam and then bring it to the front. After I have my binding sewn on there, let's pretend that this is sewn in place, I'm going to attach the hook side of a piece of Velcro to it. The hook is the scratchy side, and the easiest way again to do that is to just swish a little bit of glue from a washable glue stick on there, position it in place, and you want it to be right underneath where your binding is, and then sew all the way around that. And I usually sew around it twice to make sure that it's good and secure. Your stitching for that is going to show on the outside of the pocket, so you might want to use a thread that really blends in nicely with your front. And you'll just measure that to make sure that you've got it centered on each side.